Hi guys, Jackie with Famished Farm, and I'm back this week. We're cooking with our meal planner. This keeps us on our retirement budget. It helps us save money because we're using things already in the house. So we're using things from the pantry, the freezer, and the canning shelves. So this week was a little different. I had planned 3 entrees and 2 tailgate recipes that were newer recipes. But what I found when I got home is several of the items I had left for Rod to eat while I was gone were still in the freezer. So I kind of pivoted. What we're going to do this week then is use those tailgate recipes from Southern Living magazine that are newer recipes and use them to supplement the leftovers that were maybe not enough for a full meal. The first recipe we're making is French toast dreams, and that is going to supplement that frittata that I made that's in the freezer. The next recipe from the tailgating recipes is a garlic bread pizza. And what I liked about that one was I have everything I need in the kitchen except for the frozen garlic bread, which is pretty easy to find in the freezer section. I don't have the fontina cheese, but I figured I'd just leave that out. There's also Parmesan and mozzarella in the dish, so I thought it'd be fine. And it was. And then our last recipe, which is an entree. And this is a meal kit card. This is a recipe that I received years ago from Blue Apron. I've done Blue Apron and HelloFresh, the meal kit deliveries. We enjoyed them a lot. This recipe is one of probably 100 recipes that I saved from those that are things that we really enjoyed when we made them using the meal kit. However, when I started purging my recipes for the year of Minimal Me, I found that several of them used ingredients that we just don't have, that aren't easily found, and maybe cuts of meat that I have no idea where to find them. So I purged several of those recipes then, and now I'm left with recipes that pretty much I've got everything in the kitchen already. And so let's try this one and see if we can recreate it, and let's see if it's as good as we remembered. And if it is, it'll go into the rotation. So guys, that's what we're cooking this week. Let's get cooking. So this recipe is one that I pulled thinking in the future, if I have company here, this might be a very delicious, unique way to make French toast. Now it kind of combines French toast and maybe like a cheese Danish combination, which for somebody that's dieting, that does not sound like a smart menu choice, and we can argue about that in the comments if you like. But let's just say this looked delicious, and so we're going to try a half a recipe of this. Use this to supplement the frittata that's in the freezer, and so we'll have a few pieces of this French toast along with the frittata. We've started with 4 ounces of cream cheese, which is softened. It's been sitting on the counter for several hours. We've added 2 tablespoons of powdered sugar, and the recipe says to do this with a mixer. Of course, my mixer gave out on me a couple months ago, so I've just been using good old hand power to do things, and it works just fine. We're also going to add about 3/4 of a teaspoon of vanilla. This is a 1 teaspoon measure, and we'll blend that in also. And my one worry was that this was going to be still too thick, even hand mixing this and stirring the heck out of it to go on this brioche bread, but I found it was just fine as it was. Here I am taking the 6 slices of brioche and cutting the crust off, and we're going to reserve those crusts. Those are going into a Ziploc bag and right into the freezer, where down the road I'll make either croutons or, who knows, breadcrumbs with them. Now we're going to fill the cream cheese between 2 slices of bread, and I might suggest going ahead and flipping all of the pieces of bread so you can more evenly distribute the cream cheese mixture between your three or 6 French toast that you're going to be making. I ended up having to take this first one apart because I had extra cream to use up, and that one kind of got shorted. I will tell you too that I think this would have been just as good with half of this cream cheese mixture. It was a little bit too much, I think. In the case, it was good, but just too much of a good thing, if you know what I'm saying. So I would cut that in half for the next time I make it. Now we're just going to cut each of these little sandwiches, if you will, into 4 pieces. And use your serrated knife to do this. It will just make it that much easier. The next step up is to make our custard mixture. So we're going to grab a bowl, and again, making a half a recipe, we're using just 1/3 cup of milk. And then we're going to use 2 eggs, 1 tablespoon of sugar, and 1/2 teaspoon of ground cinnamon. And then I just use my Pampered Chef little whisk to mix this all together. And at this point, the directions are telling you to preheat your griddle to 325. And on my griddle, I always lightly oil it before I start. Then we're just going to use a fork and dip each of these little sandwich pieces into the custard and then put them on your skillet. I was happy to see the recipe including the cinnamon. I like the cinnamon in French toast recipes, not just for the flavor, but it also helps you get what looks to be more even browning. If you're ever using a pan or a skillet where half of the French toast looks golden brown and delicious and the other half just looks like raw custard, sprinkle a little cinnamon on that area. It just makes it look beautiful. So here we are. We're going to see if the first one that I put on is ready to flip. And I think I figure out that, yeah, let's go ahead and flip all these. Cook time says 1 to 2 minutes per side. I'm sure I did longer than that. I like them nice and golden. And these turned out to be beautiful. And other than the fact that I think there's just a little too much of the cream cheese mixture sandwich in between these, I would say this is definitely something we'll make again. The recipe also calls for dusting some more powdered sugar on the top and then serving them warm with maple syrup for dipping. You guys do what you do, but I never put the powdered sugar on it. I just don't need the sugar. And we did serve with maple syrup. They were very good. Rod and I both enjoy Chinese takeout, so this recipe said that it was a way to satisfy your cravings for Chinese food. So I knew we were going to love that just from the start. One of the things I really enjoy about the meal delivery kits is they have you prepare all of your produce and anything that needs to be prepped ahead of time. So we're going to start. I pulled some ginger and some green onions out of the freezer, and then this little hunk of broccoli, we cut it into bite-sized pieces, and then we're going to set that to the side. And we're going to pull out our chicken thighs. Now the recipe calls for 2 chicken breasts, and one of the things I really didn't account for is the portion size on the HelloFresh and the Blue Aprons are generally, while they're definitely, I think, very generous portions, the size of the meat is different than you're going to be getting at Walmart. So 2 big chicken breasts from Walmart is probably going to be too much meat for this. And I had 5 chicken thighs, and I probably could have used half that amount. And I really didn't realize that it was too much chicken until I saw the picture versus what was in my pan when I came to the spot of cooking them. So I've trimmed those thighs. I'm setting aside the fat that goes into the freezer. Here I am preparing the spices that are going to go into the rice. Instead of using cloves of garlic, I'm just using dry, a little salt and pepper, and then we'll let those toast just for 30 seconds, a minute, and then we're going to add the rice. I have rinsed my rice. That's why it's in my strainer here. We'll put that in and then add a cup of water. So this is only a half a cup of rice to 1 cup of water. And then just follow your cooking directions. Basically, I'm going to let this come to a boil. I'll put the lid on it and then turn the heat down to simmer. And I'm going to pull my wok out and start heating up some oil in the pan. And when that comes up to heat, this is on medium-high, you're going to add the broccoli, which you've seasoned with salt and pepper. It says to cook, stirring occasionally for 3 to 5 minutes or until lightly browned and slightly softened. We were going to be pushing dinner back a couple hours, so this I did a little less than that, 3 to 5 minutes. Definitely on the 3-minute end instead of the 5-minute. And that was just simply because I knew we were going to have to reheat this. I did leave the salt out, you see there. I figured with the hoisin sauce and everything, we'd get plenty of saltiness in this dish. But here we go, we'll just stir fry it. Once the broccoli is cooked to your liking, then you're just going to simply put that in a bowl and set it to the side. So next up is the chicken, and we're going to reuse the same pot that we just made the broccoli in. We're going to season with salt and pepper. And then the one item I didn't have for this recipe is rice flour. And that box I just showed you is a gluten-free flour made with brown rice. And it does have seasonings in it. So I kind of wish I hadn't added the salt, but as it was perfectly fine. This was not too salty, but the next time I will definitely leave the salt out. You just want to coat your pieces of chicken. Now realize that I have probably double the chicken that the recipe calls for. So this, I'm really wishing I had used my big wok because right now, when I get all this chicken in, I'm going to look at the pan that they're showing the picture with nice spacing between each piece of chicken, where I've got like a pan full of chicken that I'm going to try to stir fry. And this does work. It's going to take longer than the 5 to 7 minutes that the recipe calls for, because I really have to kind of evaporate some of the juices that are coming out of this chicken until I get it to the just lightly browned and a little crispy. So that takes a little bit of time. While we're doing that, the rice is done cooking, so I'm just going to leave the lid on and set that to the side. And I really do kind of babysit this chicken while I'm cooking it. If you've used a more typical amount of chicken for this, then you're probably going to have a much quicker and easier time. You can kind of cook it and step away. When the chicken's done, you're going to add back in your broccoli. The recipe calls for sesame oil, a tablespoon. I'm just going to add about a teaspoon just for the flavor. And then 1.5 tablespoons of hoisin. I'll scrape that spoon out to get all of that thick hoisin sauce out of the measuring spoon. And then we're going to add 2 tablespoons of rice vinegar. And this is the non-seasoned variety. A little bit of water. And it calls also for a spice that I'm going to butcher, sambal oelek. And I don't have that, so I'm just going to use a tiny little squeeze of sriracha. We do not really enjoy super hot things, so that was probably about a half a teaspoon of sriracha, just enough to give it a little bit of flavor. Now, you're just going to cook this roughly 2 to 3 minutes until the sauce thickens up and your chicken is cooked through. Then you're going to test it for flavor once again to see if you need to add any more salt and pepper. I don't. We're going to finish this off with the green onions, and it does say to separate your white and green onions. I just throw them all on there and then serve it with rice. Guys, this is delicious, and this is one that we will keep in our rotation, and I'm happy to have had Blue Apron and HelloFresh back in our younger days when we could afford to have meals delivered when we were super busy. We really like this. This is one that I will keep in the rotation because most of the ingredients, now that I have this rice flour substitute, are already in my cupboard. Although I don't always have fresh broccoli, I almost always have frozen broccoli, and you could very easily substitute that. So this is another recipe from Southern Living. This was the Tailgate series, and I flagged a couple of these recipes as things we wanted to try. This one, because I basically have everything in the kitchen all the time except for the garlic bread, the frozen garlic bread. We're going to start by taking 1 cup of our jarred marinara sauce that we've canned. We're going to add a tablespoon of olive oil, a half a teaspoon of oregano, and instead of the clove of garlic you saw, I just used dry garlic. And we'll mix this up, and then we'll set that aside while we decide what to do with this garlic bread that's frozen. It doesn't really give you any instructions for handling this. The thing is frozen solid. There's no way to separate it, and even if I could, it's cut at an angle, so that's just not going to work for our French bread pizza basically. So I'm going to grab my serrated knife and just cut this thing as close to in half as I can. And it works out pretty well. It cuts nicely. This may have been out of the freezer for a few minutes, so that might have helped. But it worked pretty sweet. Now I pre-shredded the cheeses that are going to go into this. So I have a cup of mozzarella in the dish already. We're going to add about a 1/4 cup of Parmesan. And while it sounds delicious, I don't have an ounce of fontina cheese, so I'm just going to leave that out. Once we get the cheeses all mixed together, then we'll be ready to assemble our pizza. So you're just going to divvy up your pizza sauce here, your marinara that you've doctored up with some spices, and then just use a spatula and spread that evenly over your French bread or your frozen garlic bread, as is the case. Now you could easily use some French bread if you had it left to do this also. Then put your cheeses on top, and I happen to have a little bit of frozen pepperoni in the freezer, so we pulled that out and we're going to use that too. Now our cooking time is going to be 12 to 15 minutes at 425, and I think I did that on the 12-minute end of things, and it was perfect. So I'll come back here once my timer goes off, and I'm just going to check in the oven, and it looks like, yeah, I'm trying to decide, am I going to take it out? I look and it looks fine. So what it says in the instructions are when the edges are browning and your cheese is melted, then you can bump the temperature up to broil, and then let your cheese brown for 2 to 3 minutes. Now guys, I was really surprised. I did this for 3 minutes and I was kind of worried that it was too done, but it turned out just fine. Yes, it was a little crispy on a couple edges there, but it was absolutely delicious. What an easy tailgate idea. Actually, easy idea just to keep a loaf of your garlic bread in the freezer. And if you ever need a quick pizza, super simple and delicious. Guys, thanks for being here. I really appreciate you spending time with me while I'm in the kitchen. And if you have any family favorite recipes that are in a weekly rotation or a monthly rotation, let me know. Leave a link to them in the comments down below. Also, you'll get bonus points from me if they're healthy recipes and if I can use canning items. That's awesome. So we'll see you next week in the kitchen. Thanks for being here.